Please subscribe to my channel and do hit the bell icon. In this video, we'll be discussing about the H2 antihistamine, or you can say H2 histaminergic receptor blockers. So first of all, a small introduction. Histamine H2 receptor blockers have little, if any, affinity for H1 receptors. Okay, so H2 receptor blockers, these are the group of drugs which preferentially block H2 receptor in comparison to H1 receptors. Although antagonists of the histamine H2 receptor, that is H2 antagonist, block the actions of histamine at all H2 receptors, their chief clinical use is as inhibitors of gastric acid secretion in the treatment of ulcers and heartburn. So we know that H2 receptor location, it is basically located in the gastric glands where they regulate acid secretion. Apart from this, H2 receptors are also found on the blood vessels where they causes dilation of the blood vessels. They are even present on the heart and in uterus and brain. But H2 receptor blockers are exclusively used to block H2 receptor which is present on the gastric gland and to reduce the gastric acid secretion. By competitively blocking the binding of histamine to H2 receptors in the gastric parietal cells, these agents reduce intracellular concentration of cyclic AMP and thereby secretion of gastric acid. Okay, so this is the mechanism of action of the H2 receptor blockers. We'll know more about this thing as we proceed in this video. So this you can see, this is your stomach. Okay, this one is your stomach, and we know inside the stomach the gastric acid is being released, and what is responsible for gastric acid secretion is your H2 receptor. Okay, so we'll emphasize little bit on this gastric gland. So this is your gastric gland and this is the parietal cells, and from the parietal cells the gastric acid is being secreted. Okay, so there are two chief cells, and between these chief cells the parietal cells are basically located. Okay, so these are the two chief cells, and in between chief cells your parietal cell is present. Suppose this side is your stomach lumen and at this side is your interstitial fluid, and suppose this is a blood capillary that supplies the blood. Next, carbon dioxide, which is derived from metabolic activities of parietal cell, is combined with water, and these two things in presence of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, and this carbonic anhydrase is present in high concentration in these parietal cells. Okay, so carbon dioxide combines with water in presence of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase to form a compound which is your carbonic acid. Now this carbonic acid so formed, it is very much unstable compound, and it immediately splits into a proton, that is your hydrogen ion, and a bicarbonate ion. Now this hydrogen ion so formed, it is actively pumped into the lumen of the stomach. Next, this red ball what you can see, it is a pump. It is the proton pump, or you can say hydrogen potassium pump, and the name only says everything. This is the proton pump. Proton pump means these are basically pumping proton into the gastric lumen, and since it is a pump means it is involved in an active process. Active process means it requires energy in the form of ATP for pumping this, for pumping action, for pumping the proton, and in addition to that, the protons, the hydrogen ion is transported in exchange with the potassium ion. Okay, so one proton, one hydrogen moves inside the stomach and the potassium ion leaves the stomach. Okay, so a potassium ion will be moving into the parietal cells, but there is a potassium channel via which this potassium ion will be moving back, flipping back again into the stomach lumen. Okay, next you see in this blood capillary, a sodium chloride is there. Okay, so sodium chloride from the adjacent blood vessel, it splits up into sodium ion and chloride ion. Okay, now on the basolateral area of your parietal cells there is a transporter. Okay, and this is a bicarbonate chloride antipode. Antipode means a bicarbonate ion will be moving inside this blood vessel, and the chloride ion in turn will be moving into this parietal cell. Okay, so this is an antipode. One thing is going and one thing is moving inside. Okay, so bicarbonate ion is leaving the parietal cell and moving into the blood capillary, whereas the chloride ion, it is leaving the blood capillary and moving inside this parietal cell. Now the bicarbonate ion from the parietal cell that enters into the blood, it combines with the sodium ion to form sodium bicarbonate. Okay, and this sodium bicarbonate so formed, it is responsible for the alkaline tide to occur. Next, this chloride ion that has moved inside the parietal cell, it is diffused via the chloride channel into your stomach lumen. Okay, and one chloride ion when moves inside, a potassium ion also moves inside the stomach lumen. Now in this gastric lumen we have both hydrogen ion and the chloride ion, and these two ion fuses together to form your gastric hydrochloric acid. So this is how your HCl, your hydrochloric acid or your gastric acid is been synthesized. Okay, so now what we are discussing about, actually we are discussing about how to inhibit this hydrochloric acid, and we have got a clue. We can block H2 receptor by which this HCl synthesis can be inhibited. But where exactly is this H2 receptor present? We'll check out now. Now suppose this is your parietal cell where your proton pump is present, which is pumping hydrogen ion inside and potassium ion outside with the help of your ATP, the energy. And upon these parietal cells we have got three receptors. These are the histamine H2 receptor, cholecystokinin, that is CCK2 gastrin receptor, and the muscarinic M3 receptor. Next, in close proximity to the parietal cell is present the gut endocrine cell called the enterochromaffin like cells, that is ECL cell, and inside this ECL cell there is a store of histamine. Plus ECL cell have got two important receptor, that is CCK2 receptor, that is same the gastrin receptor, and the muscarinic M3 receptor. Next we have got gastrin secreting cells, that is G cells. Okay, G cells are the cells that releases gastrin, and this gastrin will combine with its receptor, and the receptor of gastrin is your CCK2 receptor, which you can see on both the parietal cells as well as on the ECL cells. Now these G cells, these are primarily found in the pyloric antrum, and they can also be found in the duodenum and pancreas, and these G cells basically secretes gastrin. Next we have the enteric nervous system present in our gastrointestinal tract. Okay, now suppose you consume any food. As soon as you eat any food, what happens? This food will cause activation of this G cell, and this activated G cell will start releasing gastrin, and this gastrin will go and bind with its receptor, that is CCK2 receptor, and this CCK2 receptor, as you can see, it is present on both ECL cell as well as on the parietal cells. Okay, next, sometimes we think of some food. Okay, we think of some food inside our brain. Okay, and this thinking, what it will do, it will cause vagally mediated reflexes of the ganglionic cells to cause activation of this enteric nervous system. Next, after this, a post-ganglionic neuron will be released that will elaborate GRP. GRP is the gastrin releasing peptide, which in turn will cause activation of this G cell. And we know whenever G cell gets activated, it will cause release of gastrin, and this gastrin will bind to its receptor, that is CCK2 receptor, which is present on both ECL cell as well as on the parietal cell. What will happen when the CCK2 receptor gets activated, we'll check out later on. For now, just you you just remember this thing, that whenever G cell gets activated, it will cause release of gastrin. And what is the reason behind activation of G cell? Means whenever we consume food, it will cause directly activation of G cell, or else if we think of any of your favorite dish, favorite food, it will cause activation of GRP, in turn causing activation of this G cell, thereby causing release of this gastrin. Now whenever we think of any food, it will not only cause activation of G cell, it will also cause release of acetylcholine because of vagal stimulation. And this acetylcholine, it can bind with its muscarinic receptor, which is present on ECL cell. Even we have got muscarinic receptor on the parietal cells as well. Okay, now you just think about this ECL cell now. Okay, enterochromaffin like cells. On the enterochromaffin like cells, we have got CCK2 receptor and M3 receptor. Whenever these two receptor gets activated, it will cause activation of this ECL cells. Okay, it will cause stimulation of this ECL cells, enterochromaffin like cells. And whenever these cells get activated, what it will do? It will cause the release of histamine, and this released histamine will go and bind to its receptor, which is the H2 histaminic receptor. Okay, so what was the main role behind the activation of M3 and CCK2 receptor of the ECL cell? It will cause release of histamine, and this released histamine will bind to the H2 receptor. Now this will cause activation of this H2 receptor, and H2 receptor is a kind of stimulatory kind of G protein coupled receptor. Okay, it is GS kind of G protein coupled receptor, which will cause increased in the intracellular level of cyclic AMP. Whenever cyclic AMP is increased, then what will happen? It will cause activation of protein kinase, and this protein kinase in turn will cause activation of this proton pump, because of which there will be influx of hydrogen ion, outflux of potassium ion, and thereby there will be pumping action of the proton. So what we want to block this H2 receptor so that this proton pump can be inhibited. Okay, so this is how the H2 blockers will be producing inhibition of gastric acid release. They are blocking H2 receptor. But you can see on these parietal cells, it not only contains H2 receptor, we have got M3 receptor also and CCK2 receptor also. And like H2 receptor, these M3 and CCK2 receptor can also cause activation of proton pump. But the efficacy of this proton pump activation is greatest by the H2 action as compared to CCK2 and M3 receptor. When this gastrin binds with CCK2 receptor of the parietal cells, or acetylcholine binds with M3 receptor of the parietal cells, it can also cause activation of the proton pump, but the efficacy of proton pump activity is very much less as compared to activation done by H2 histamine receptor. Okay, so if we block H2 receptor, then this acid secretion can be greatly reduced. Okay, so we are talking about H2 antagonist. These are the first class of highly effective drugs for acid peptic disease. By competitively blocking the binding of histamine to H2 receptor, these agents reduce the intracellular concentration of cyclic adenosine monophosphate, that is your cyclic AMP, and thereby secretion of gastric acid can be reduced. The four drugs used in the United States are cimetidine, ranitidine, formatidine, and nizatidine. Potently inhibit, that is greatly than 90% basal, food stimulated and nocturnal secretion of gastric acid after a single dose. Cimetidine is the prototype histamine H2 receptor antagonist. However, its utility is limited by its adverse effect profile and drug-drug interactions. So, we'll talk about the actions of this H2 antagonist. The histamine H2 receptor antagonist cimetidine, ranitidine, formatidine, and nizatidine act selectively on H2 receptor in the stomach, blood vessels, and other sites, but they have no effect on H1 receptors since they are exclusively H2 receptor blocker. They competitively antagonist of histamine and are fully reversible. Next, we'll talk about the therapeutic uses of this H2 antagonist. The use of these agents has decreased with the advent of other proton pump inhibitors, which are other class of drugs that can be used for treating peptic ulcer. So, first use of H2 antagonists are to treat peptic ulcer. All four agents are equally effective in promoting the healing of duodenal and gastric ulcers. However, recurrence is common after treatment with H2 antagonist is stopped. Patients with NSAID-induced ulcer should be treated with PPIs because these agents heal and prevent further ulcer better than H2 antagonist. Okay, so as we have seen in the previous slide, the use of H2 antagonist is greatly reduced after the advent of this proton pump inhibitors. Next use is acute stress ulcer. These agents are typically given as an intravenous infusion to prevent and manage acute stress ulcers associated with high-risk patients in intensive care units. However, because tolerance may occur with these agents in this setting, PPIs have gained favor for this indication as well. Okay, so sometimes stress-induced ulcers are being produced which were used to be treated by H2 antagonist, but now it has been presently greatly replaced by PPIs. Next use is gastroesophageal reflux disease. Low doses of H2 antagonist currently available for over-the-counter sale appear to be effective for prevention and treatment of heartburn, that is gastroesophageal reflux, in only about 50% of patients. H2 receptor antagonists act by stopping acid secretion. Therefore, they may not relieve symptoms for at least 45 minutes. Antacid more quickly and efficiently neutralizes secreted acid already in the stomach, but their action is only temporary. For all these reasons, PPIs are now used preferentially in the treatment of this disorder. Okay, so previously for treatment of gastroesophageal reflux disease, previously H2 antagonists were being used. So gastroesophageal reflux disease means sometimes what happens, gastric acid from the stomach, it may move to upward, it will regurgitate into the esophagus, and on the esophagus we don't have the protective mucus and bicarbonate layer, because of which this gastric acid will destroy the some layer of esophagus, because of which we feel like a heartburn kind of condition. So previously H2 antagonists were being used. But how this H2 antagonist will act? It will act by blocking histaminic receptor. It will inhibit the secretion of the gastric acid. But what will we do for previously available acid? It will just stop the synthesis. But whatever previously synthesized gastric acid is there, we need to reduce that thing. So in this gastroesophageal reflux disease, we are preferencing the antacids to neutralize the available acid. Okay, so in this condition are also H2 antagonists not that much used as such presently. Next, we'll check out the pharmacokinetics. First of all, of cimetidine. Cimetidine and other H2 antagonists are given orally, distribute widely throughout the body, and are excreted mainly in urine. Okay, so you can see cimetidine have got a kind of water solubility. It is almost unchanged, mainly excreted via the urine. Cimetidine normally has a short serum half-life, which is increased in renal failure. Approximately 30% of a dose of cimetidine is slowly inactivated by the liver's microsomal mixed function oxygenase system and can interfere in the metabolism of many other drugs. So by this line you can understand that there is a chance of drug-drug interaction. The other 70% is excreted unchanged in urine. So you can say maximum like 70% of the drug is unchanged via the excreted via the renal route, but 30% will undergo drug metabolism in the liver. The dosage of all these drugs must be decreased in patients with hepatic or renal failure. Cimetidine inhibits cytochrome P450 and can slow metabolism and potentiate the action of several drugs. for example warfarin, diazepam, phenytoin, quinidine, carbamazepine, thiophanate and imipramine, sometimes resulting in serious adverse clinical effects. Okay, so there are chances of drug-drug interaction, sometimes inhibition of metabolism or potentiation of metabolism may take place. So therefore cimetidine should not be given along with these all drugs like warfarin, diazepam, phenytoin. Warfarin should not be given along with these drugs. Next, pharmacokinetics of ranitidine. Compared to cimetidine, ranitidine is longer acting and is 5 to 10 fold more potent. Ranitidine has minimal side effects and dose, but and does not produce the anti-androgenic and prolactin stimulating effects of cimetidine. Unlike cimetidine, it does not inhibit the mixed function oxygenase system in the liver and does not affect the concentrations of other drugs. Next, pharmacokinetics of famotidine. Famotidine is similar to ranitidine in its pharmacologic actions, but it is 20 to 50 times more potent than cimetidine and 3 to 20 times more potent than ranitidine. Last, pharmacokinetics of nizatidine. Nizatidine is similar to ranitidine in its pharmacologic action and potency. In contrast to cimetidine, ranitidine and famotidine, which are metabolized by the liver, nizatidine is eliminated principally by the kidneys. That means 100% this nizatidine is eliminated unchanged form via the renal route. Because little first pass metabolism occurs with nizatidine, its bioavailability is 100%. Lastly, talking about the adverse effects of this H2 antagonist. The major adverse effects of cimetidine are usually minor and are associated mainly with reduced gastric acid production, the major pharmacologic activity of the drug, which is nothing but the extension of the pharmacological action of this H2 antagonist. Side effects occur only in small number of patients and generally do not require discontinuation of the drug. The most common side effects are headache, dizziness, diarrhea and muscle pain. Other central nervous system effects, that is such as confusion and hallucination, occurs primarily in elderly patients and after intravenous administration. Cimetidine can also have endocrine effects because it acts as a non-steroidal anti-androgen. These effects include gynecomastia and galactorrhea. Drugs such as ketoconazole, which depends on an acidic medium for gastric absorption, may not be efficiently absorbed if taken with one of these H2 receptor antagonists. Okay, so ketoconazole is an acidic drug, and we know for absorption of acidic drug we require acidic medium. But what these H2 antagonists are doing, they are reducing the gastric acid, thereby reducing the acidic medium. So ketoconazole or any other acidic drug, their absorption will be greatly reduced. That will markedly affect their bioavailability and their onset of action. So this was all about your H2 antagonist. I hope you people found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.